September 26, 2022. Just before 8 p.m., a sailboat drifts calmly across the Baltic Sea. The captain prepares for the night ahead. Checking his radar, he spots two red signals blinking on the display. He peers into the darkness but sees nothing unusual. Deciding to investigate, he contacts a nearby vessel. Their crew describes an odd phenomenon: massive whirlpools in the water. As his ship approaches the area, a sharp, unpleasant odor hits him: gas. He quickly alerts Swedish authorities, who confirm his suspicions. An underwater leak is releasing immense quantities of natural gas into the sea. Nord Stream 1 and 2, twin undersea pipelines stretching from Russia to Europe, the longest in the world, are compromised. 4 explosions occur at 2 separate locations, roughly 50 miles apart. It soon becomes evident that this was no accident. It was deliberate sabotage, one of the largest acts of destruction in modern history. This act triggered the biggest methane leak ever recorded and jeopardized the energy supply of Europe's largest economy. Journalists scramble to uncover who is responsible and why, while officials remain unusually tight-lipped. Amidst the chaos of war, an incredible story unfolds. One involving conflicting intelligence reports, potential false flag operations, and a frantic search for evidence during Europe's largest armed conflict since World War II. A tale filled with speed camera snapshots, aging boats, traces of military-grade explosives, CIA training programs, and a team of patriots on a high-stakes mission that would reshape the geopolitical landscape of an entire continent. Gas bubbles rise over an area exceeding 1 square kilometer in the Baltic Sea, a boiling cauldron. The busy waters burst with gas escaping from ruptured Russian pipelines. One investigator told me this case is by far the most politically sensitive and significant in the history of the Federal Republic. There's no shortage of theories about who or what caused the blasts. These are Nord Stream 1 and 2, the largest underwater pipelines globally, costing approximately 17 billion euros. They span the Baltic Sea, connecting Russia directly to Germany. Back in September 2005, Vladimir Putin and then Chancellor Gerhard Schröder shook hands on the agreement to construct the first pipeline. It was Schröder's final major move before leaving office. Just weeks after losing re-election, Schröder landed a new role as chairman of Nord Stream AG, becoming the top lobbyist for Russian energy giant Gazprom. His successor, Angela Merkel, continued pushing the project forward. By 2011, cheap Russian natural gas flowed directly into Germany. Russia earned around 10 billion euros annually. Economically, Nord Stream 1 proved a huge success for both nations. Soon, Russia supplied nearly half of Germany's natural gas, and discussions for a second pipeline were already underway. However, outside Germany, Nord Stream sparked significant backlash. The US warned the project could give Russia dangerous leverage, turning gas into a geopolitical weapon. The European Union also sought to reduce its reliance on Russian gas. Eastern European countries resisted fiercely. Until now, Russia's only route to deliver gas to Europe passed through Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics, paying hefty transit fees along the way. The Nord Stream pipelines allowed Russia to bypass these nations. Some military analysts believe Putin might have invaded Ukraine sooner, if not for the pipelines running through Ukrainian territory. Nevertheless, Berlin remained undeterred by criticism. Even after Russia illegally annexed Crimea, Germany approved the second pipeline. In late 2021, Nord Stream 2 stood ready to operate. But when Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine became imminent, Germany halted the project. A few months later, Putin cut off gas through Nord Stream 1. Both pipelines remained loaded with gas, poised to reopen at any moment. Then in September 2022, disaster struck. So who's behind it? This could easily be the plot of a gripping mystery. Some stories and images are so striking they end up decorating our walls, but let's face it, traditional posters often lack durability. This product is different. It offers high-quality metal prints, bold and sturdy, easy to set up. You simply attach a magnet to your wall, snap the artwork on, and you're done. No tools, no holes, no hassle. Choose from over 2 million stunning designs, ranging from abstract landscapes to officially licensed artwork. Think iconic worlds like Star Wars, The Witcher, or Cyberpunk 2077. A personal favorite we've hung on our walls. The new texture series looks especially impressive, with raised textures and 3D contours. Check out these incredible NASA designs, for example. If you ever want to switch things up, swapping them out takes seconds. Now's the time to get yours. The company is celebrating its 12th anniversary with its biggest sale of the year, 33% off 1 to 2 disc plates, 37% off 3, and 42% off 4 or more. Every order includes surprise gifts, and yes, the discount applies to Textura too. Use code FERN or click the link in the description /adfern. The Baltic Sea is one of the most closely monitored bodies of water globally. Larger ships constantly broadcast their GPS locations, and the type of explosives needed to destroy 2 pipelines simultaneously is extremely difficult to acquire. Investigators soon agree that whoever orchestrated this had access to substantial resources. This must have been a state actor. The first prime suspect is Russia. There's also a potential. In 2022, blowing up the pipelines could provide them with a legal excuse to evade those contracts. This is Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the German weekly newspaper Die Zeit. He has spent months investigating the case. When I first heard about the explosions, I immediately assumed it must be the Russians. It fits their classic pattern of obstruction, sabotage, and provocation. Initially, the suspicion seems valid. 4 days before the explosion, a Danish naval vessel patrolled near the island of Bornholm. It spotted 6 Russian ships, right where the pipelines would explode 4 days later. They were dark ships, meaning their AIS transponders were switched off, and they weren't broadcasting their location. One of them was the SS-750, a 100-yard special ops vessel designed for underwater missions. On board, a mini-submarine equipped with cranes for heavy-duty lifting, exactly the setup needed to plant explosives on a pipeline. 3 months earlier, 2 other Russian military vessels had been spotted engaging in similar dark shipping activities in the same waters near the future blast site. What were they doing there? Around the same time, suspicion also turned toward the United States. Just weeks before Russia invaded Ukraine, President Biden and German Chancellor Scholz held a joint press conference. If Russia invades, Nord Stream 2 will cease to exist. We will bring an end to it. 6 months later, both pipelines exploded. That's when Seymour Hersh stepped in. A Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist known for exposing major scandals but also for spreading controversial theories. He claimed that U.S. Navy divers planted explosives on the pipelines during a NATO exercise in summer 2022. He also alleged they received assistance from a Norwegian Navy minesweeper and surveillance aircraft. The supposed motive? To push Russian gas out of the European market and make room for American liquefied natural gas. Norway, another key supplier, would benefit too. But Hersh's story quickly came under scrutiny. Flight data recordings from Norway didn't align with his timeline, and the ships he mentioned hadn't been near the site. My impression is that Seymour Hersh relied on a single source. An old contact from the intelligence world. Someone who picked up fragments of a story and filled in the gaps. Hersh admitted he had only one source, and that this source hadn't witnessed anything firsthand. To me, that's a major red flag. Hersh is 88 years old. In recent years, he's faced repeated criticism for relying on thin sources and promoting shaky claims. He no longer comments publicly on his Nord Stream story. The strongest lead points to neither Russia nor the United States. Shortly after the explosion, Hashtag received a crucial tip-off from a well-connected source within the intelligence community. I called someone I've known for a long time and asked, "Was it Russia?" He gave me a long, quiet, doubtful look and slowly shook his head. After the explosions, German authorities launched an immediate investigation. The Federal Prosecutor's Office took charge of the case. The matter was so politically sensitive that several major media outlets began collaborating. You'll find links to their impressive research in the description. Julia Klaus is an investigative journalist at public German TV broadcaster ZDF. She's part of one of the extensive research teams. We learned that the yacht Andromeda may have played a role in the operation. The Andromeda is a small German sailing yacht just over 15 yards long. But could such a modest boat execute a sophisticated military-grade underwater demolition? Its primary advantage lies in its discretion. Unlike larger ships, it doesn't need to broadcast its position. Journalists discovered that the Andromeda was chartered between August 27th and September 24th from a German boat rental company called Mola Yachting. The total rental fee of €11,900 was wired by a Polish travel agency. They submitted 2 passport copies, one Bulgarian, one Romanian. The name on the Romanian ID belonged to Stefan Maracu. Maracu lives in Moldova, a small landlocked country in Eastern Europe. Julia Klaus and her team flew to meet him. We sat in his garden, and when we showed him the passport number, he instantly recognized it. He said it matched his old passport, which had long expired, but he had no idea how his personal data ended up linked to the Nord Stream bombing. The passport was fake, as was the Bulgarian one issued to a man named Mihai Popov. Another team of journalists traveled to V Harbor on the German Baltic island of Rügen, where the Andromeda crew was last seen. They spoke to the harbor master, who remembered seeing them. They interviewed witnesses and even rented the Andromeda themselves. Step by step, they pieced together the likely route the boat took. Meanwhile, Stark and his team pursued another lead, the Polish travel agency that paid for the yacht. It turned out to be a shell company. March 2023, Stark and his research team published their findings. The timing was delicate. The German public was embroiled in a heated debate over whether the country should send tanks to support Ukraine. Now, reports suggested Ukrainians might have attacked a German-Russian energy pipeline, politically explosive news. There was also speculation that the Andromeda lead might be a trap, a false flag deliberately planned by Russia to confuse the public and sow political doubt in Germany. But behind closed doors, senior officials already knew who they should focus on. German authorities had zeroed in on a group likely pulling the strings. June 2022, 3 months before the Nord Stream blast. The German Foreign Intelligence Service, BND, received a top-secret report from the Dutch Military Intelligence Service, MIV. They had been tipped off about an imminent sabotage operation targeting Nord Stream 1. The suspected culprits, a Ukrainian Special Forces unit traveling with fake passports and a rented boat. The attack was scheduled for June 19th, just days away. Shortly after, another warning came in from the CIA, also alerted by the Dutch. But June 19th arrived and nothing happened. The warnings were dismissed as false alarms. No one notified the German Federal Police, the German Navy, or counter-terrorism task forces. 3 months later, the pipelines were hit almost exactly as the Dutch report predicted. Immediately, investigators turned their attention toward Ukraine. January 2023, 4 months after the explosions, investigators aboard the Andromeda found compromising material: DNA, fingerprints, a water bottle, and a single barefoot shoe. Traces of a powerful underwater explosive called HMX, also known as octogen, were found on a table and in the toilet, the exact compound detected at the Nord Stream blast sites. At this point, investigators were certain the boat was part of the secret sabotage operation, but who did it? Then came the key piece of evidence, a photo. Early morning, a van speeds down a rural road. The driver, hired to transport a group of Ukrainians to the port, carries their diving gear in the back. He's going fast, too fast. The speed camera snapshot shows a white Citroën Space Tourer with Ukrainian license plates. Next to the driver sits an unidentified passenger. Investigators tracked down the unsuspecting driver. He confirmed the passenger's identity, a Ukrainian national named Vadim Z. Bingo. The grainy image marked a turning point. In June 2024, German investigators issued a European arrest warrant for him. Over time, more connections pointed toward Ukraine. Investigators identified the alleged Andromeda crew. Journalists even spoke with a Ukrainian informant who claimed he helped plan the attack. Today, authorities have a fairly clear picture of what most likely occurred. Spring 2022, a rented office in Kyiv, Ukraine. Inside, a small commando team allegedly led by a man named Roman Sheremeta. He's a legend in Ukrainian intelligence circles. Several members of his unit trained with the CIA. Their specialty? Covert ops and sabotage. They're Ukrainian patriots. After Russia's full-scale assault on their country, they were eager to strike back. They chose to target the Nord Stream pipelines, a symbol of Russian power funneling billions into Putin's war chest. They needed skilled divers for such a deep-water operation. They shortlisted 20 candidates and selected 4, all civilians. 2 soldiers completed the team, a makeshift crew of 6 Ukrainians who barely knew each other. September 8, 2022. Late morning at V Harbor on Rugen Island. A sailboat pulls into the dock behind the harbor office. It's arriving straight from Rostock, where it was chartered 2 days earlier by the crew posing as tourists. But they weren't there for a sailing trip. They had come to carry out one of the boldest acts of sabotage in history. Meet Volodymyr Z., a heating engineer in his mid-40s living in Poland. He's also a scuba instructor specializing in deep diving expeditions. Next is Daria Kamenova, at least that's her cover name. Early 40s, petite, brown hair. She and her husband run a small diving school in Ukraine. Volodymyr Z. once worked for them as a scuba instructor. Then there's Daria's husband, codenamed Folgot, another experienced deep-sea diver, pale, boyish, thinning hair. The 4th member is the commander, codenamed Rubik, a seasoned combat soldier built like a tank and a capable diver himself. He's the mission leader aboard the Andromeda, staying in constant contact with Kyiv via 16 burner phones and a stash of prepaid SIM cards. The 5th member is the captain, an active duty soldier, grumpy, hostile, broad-framed. A witness later described him as someone who'd eaten one too many hamburgers. The 6th member is the assistant, short, middle-aged. The group got to work immediately. A harbor worker watched them from a distance. They unloaded grocery bags from a van, carrying them to the boat across the parking lot. Each walk was about 100 yards. The assistant stood next to an unusual amount of compressed air cylinders. The harbor master walked over. Need a hand? You can pull the van closer if you want. The assistant shook his head. We're good. The harbor master didn't realize these cylinders weren't for diving. Each contained up to 35 kilograms of HMX explosives. This was the last real chance to stop them. It passed shortly after the Andromeda cast off. Operation Diameter was underway. Here's the path both Nord Stream pipelines take. From Rugen, the Andromeda made its way to Bornholm and docked again on the small Danish island of Christiansø. Out on the open water, the crew assessed the situation. The boat was past its prime, the wood creaked. Next is Daria Kamenova. At least that's her cover name. Early 40s, petite, brown hair. She and her husband run a small diving school in Ukraine. Volodymyr Z. once worked for them as a scuba instructor. Then there's Daria's husband, codenamed Folgot, another experienced deep-sea diver, pale, boyish, thinning hair. The 4th member is the commander, codenamed Rubik, a seasoned combat soldier built like a tank and a capable diver himself. He's the mission leader aboard the Andromeda, staying in constant contact with Kyiv via 16 burner phones and a stash of prepaid SIM cards. The 5th member is the captain, an active duty soldier, grumpy, hostile, broad-framed. A witness later described him as someone who'd eaten one too many hamburgers. The 6th member is the assistant, short, middle-aged. The group got to work immediately. A harbor worker watched them from a distance. They unloaded grocery bags from a van, carrying them to the boat across the parking lot. Each walk was about 100 yards. The assistant stood next to an unusual amount of compressed air cylinders. The harbor master walked over. Need a hand? You can pull the van closer if you want. The assistant shook his head. We're good. The harbor master didn't realize these cylinders weren't for diving. Each contained up to 35 kilograms of HMX explosives. This was the last real chance to stop them. It passed shortly after the Andromeda cast off. Operation Diameter was underway. Here's the path both Nord Stream pipelines take. From Rügen, the Andromeda made its way to Bornholm and docked again on the small Danish island of Christiansø. Out on the open water, the crew assessed the situation. The boat was past its prime. The wood creaked with every turn, the walls were scuffed, and the autopilot was broken. The 75-horsepower diesel engine rattled like an old farm tractor. It was quiet out on the Baltic Sea. They passed only a few ships, and no one paid much attention to a small sailboat bobbing on the waves. The crew used sonar technology to locate the pipelines. They likely conducted multiple expedition dives, but progress was slow. They could only dive once per day. By the end of the second week of September, a storm rolled in. Winds of 20 knots whipped across the sea, and waves climbed to nearly 7 feet. The Andromeda sought shelter in a small harbor in Sandhamn, Sweden. A few days later, the skies cleared and the wind died down. But the waves still rocked the boat, and most of the crew fell seasick. Conditions were barely stable enough to dive. The sonar hummed as the crew awaited tension. Then, finally, a signal. They found the pipeline about 80 meters below, directly beneath the Andromeda. It was go time. Now or never. They lowered a weighted rope into the water. About a minute later, it hit the seabed. A plastic canister wrapped in a trash bag floated on the surface as a makeshift buoy, marking the spot so they wouldn't drift off. 2 divers strapped on their scuba tanks. Then they grabbed a separate tank filled with high-powered explosives. Carefully slipping off the stern, they attached the tank to the rope. One last check, and they disappeared. Following the rope down into the dark, this was the pipeline, 260 feet below the surface. It was cold and pitch black. The pressure on the human body here was about 9 times greater than at sea level. 2 beams of light pierced the darkness. They had roughly 15 minutes on the seabed. To plant the bomb, they needed to locate a connection joint along the pipeline. Their headlights illuminated only 6 to 7 feet ahead. After some searching, they found a seam. They placed a silicone pad between the bomb and the pipe to amplify the blast. Done. All set. At this depth, standard scuba gear wouldn't suffice. The divers likely used advanced equipment, rebreathers, multiple tanks, and trimix breathing gases. To avoid decompression sickness, they ascended slowly, making several stops along the way. The entire process took at least 40 minutes. During the dive, the Andromeda kept moving to avoid suspicion. Now, the ship returned to the makeshift buoy. The crew was relieved. Over several days, they carried out multiple additional dives, planting at least 6 bombs across the 2 pipelines. Each charge was fitted with a timer set to detonate on September 26th. On the morning of September 23rd, the Andromeda was spotted drifting at Rostock Harbor. Staff from Mola Yachting arrived to check in the rental boat, but found it empty. The crew was already gone. Unexplained leaks in 2 major pipelines from Russia to Europe became a major concern for the European Union. Denmark, Poland, and Sweden stated they believed the leaks in 2 major Russian gas pipelines to Europe were the result of sabotage. Tonight, sabotage at sea. That's what President Biden called the leaks and explosions on the Nord Stream pipelines. 3 days later, the saboteurs could watch the outcome of their mission live on TV. It worked, except for one detail. One line of Nord Stream 2 remained intact. The crew accidentally hit the first line twice. June 2024, Polish authorities received a European arrest warrant for Vadim Z from Germany's Federal Prosecutor's Office. Inside, they found the suspect's listed address in a residential suburb of Warsaw. Under EU law, Polish prosecutors were expected to act on such a warrant and detain the suspect. No questions asked. But apparently, Poland did nothing. It's very likely the Poles tipped off the Ukrainian diver and the Ukrainian government to help him flee the country before he could be arrested and tried in Germany. On the morning of July 6th, at exactly 6:20 a.m., a BMW with Ukrainian diplomatic plates crossed the Polish border into Ukraine. The co-driver was Vadim Z. The suspected saboteur vanished and hasn't been seen since. For now, no arrest warrants have been issued for the rest of the crew due to insufficient evidence. To this day, it's not definitively proven who was behind the Nord Stream attack. All suspects deny involvement. That said, a growing body of evidence supports the Andromeda theory. The yacht, forged documents, diving gear, witness testimonies, DNA. It all paints a compelling picture. There are credible indications that the former commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces approved the plan. Still, nothing is certain. Some experts haven't ruled out the possibility that the Andromeda may have been part of a more elaborate deception or false flag operation by Russia or the US. Many experts do believe the attack was likely carried out by Ukrainian patriots. Whether it happened with the government's blessing remains debatable. You could argue that Ukraine wouldn't want to provoke a key weapons supplier like Germany and risk losing critical military support. The alleged attackers must have viewed the pipelines as an immediate threat to Ukraine, as tools of Russian leverage and thus legitimate targets. Today, no Russian gas flows through Nord Stream 1 or 2. Germany has managed to break free of its dependence faster than expected. Nord Stream was the most expensive, ambitious, and controversial underwater pipeline project the world has ever seen. Now, both pipelines sit idle, partially destroyed, deep beneath the Baltic Sea.